Good afternoon, beautiful and handsome students of God First College. I still remain Mr. Albert, your geography teacher. How are we? Wherever we are, I want to believe the hands of God are protecting us. You are all welcome to this online class. We shall be looking at interdependency between the urban and rural settlement. That is the topic we have today, interdependency between the urban and rural settlement. Before we go into the major, let me quickly give you what you need to look at, or what we are to look at today. That is the objective of this lesson. We call it learning objectives. We call it learning objectives. That is, at the end of this lesson, students should be able to explain the settlement pattern of urban and rural areas. 2, discuss the dependency of urban settlement on rural settlement. 3, explain the dependency of rural settlement on urban settlement. Then we go to the main business of today. What is urban settlement pattern? Before we look at urban settlement pattern, how the pattern is, we'll look at what urban settlement is. It is a nucleated type of settlement with many infrastructures, such as electricity, pipe and water, good roads, and many others. Then the pattern in the settlement, or the settlement pattern, we have people of diverse cultural backgrounds. You will see a man speaking Hausa, see another one speaking Igbo. That is their languages, because they came from different places. They were trained by different parents. They eat different foods. You see one cooking oha, another one cooking amala, just like that. The way this one will be dressing, for example, in Hausa attire, another one in Igbo attire. That's what I mean by having different cultural backgrounds. Some will be greeting Otutuoma, then another one will be greeting Ekaro. They have different cultural backgrounds. That is where you see one man saying, when you want to greet another, you prostrate and greet the other. But another one will just go and say, good morning, sir, and go like that. They have different cultural backgrounds. And they do diverse activities. That is, you see some going to the bank, some go to the school to teach, like I am doing now. Some go to the manufacturing industries and so many others. Then the rural settlement pattern is not the same way like we have at the settlement pattern or the urban areas. Rural settlement pattern is different from the urban settlement pattern. But before I give you the characteristics or some features of the rural settlement pattern, we need to also know what rural settlement is. That is, it is a nucleated or dispersed form of settlement with little or no infrastructure. When we say settlement is nucleated or the pattern is nucleated, it means houses are built close to each other. Then it could be dispersed. That is, in case of a rural settlement. You have a house, you have a bush separating one house from the other, a bush in between. This is common in the southeastern part of the country. What they mainly use, or what they may use, what do they do with that bush? Most times when they live, the essence or the reason for keeping that bush and separating the houses is they leave the houses and then they go to the bush. The dweller, the rural dwellers in that house, they go to the bush to farm, then they come back to their house to live. Then we look at some of the features of the rural settlement or pattern. It is a pattern usually has people with the same cultural background, unlike the urban settlement we have discussed. The way this one greets is the same way. Mr. B and Mr. A, they greet the same way. Mr. B dresses in Hausa attire. You will see Mr. A also will dress in Hausa attire. They speak the same language and they engage in the same primary activities like farming, fishing, laundry, and so many others. Then we need to look at dependency of rural settlement on urban settlement. That is the area where urban settlement rely or depend on the rural settlement. One, provision of food. The urban areas depend on rural areas for foodstuff like yam, cocoa, cotton, banana, and so many others. They are being consumed both in the rural areas and the urban areas, but the urban areas do not have the farms where these things are produced. Then number two, we have the raw materials. For example, the cocoa, the cotton. These things are being made or produced in the rural areas. They are taken to the urban areas, like the cities, from the village. Then mercy. In area of mercy, you know that we take mercy whenever we're having one or two challenges with our health. What are used to make the drugs or medicine that we take in the urban areas? They are brought from, the raw materials are brought from the villages, like the roots of plants, the leaves of plants, and even the stems. Some plants have almost all their parts used for medicine. For example, you have here, this is a plant, a young plant or growing plant. The leaf, the stem is shown. These things are produced in the villages or the urban rural areas. Then they are taken to the urban areas. The cocoa, I've spoken about that. Food production. This is a banana. This is cocoa. You go to a market, Ketu market, or Mindful market, Balogu market, and other markets, you see people rushing to buy cocoa, buy banana. These things are not produced here in Lagos. They come from the rural area. Right? We go back to what we are discussing. There are some limitations to these things that the rural areas they do, or where the urban areas depend on the rural areas. Number one is rural-urban migration. That is people living in the rural areas. If you're a villager, you've been staying for a while in the village, you decide to travel to the city. Then what you were producing there will not be gotten in the city. So that is what we call rural-urban migration. People live in the rural areas for the urban area. Then lack of farmland. It could be as a result of fragmentation, division, cutting land into small pieces. Where a man has big land, area of land used for farming, it is now cut down. What he was producing before will not be the same. Then natural disaster. If the cocoa I showed to you on the screen, if you have a man producing cocoa, and this cocoa that is needed in the city is a plantation that the man does. He comes to the farmland in the morning and discovers that the cocoa production land area is being swallowed by earthquake. What he's producing cannot be produced. Then we have other areas like flood too that can cause that can be called natural disaster and so many other things. Then let us look at the dependency of rural settlement on urban settlement. We have discussed areas where urban settlement depend on the rural settlement. This time around, we'll be discussing where the rural settlement depend on the urban settlement. Number one is medical services. Since hospitals are built or are seen or located in the cities, the villagers, when they are sick, they come to the cities for treatment. Just like some of our rich men also leave Lagos or Abuja and travel to UK for treatment. So the rural dwellers, they come to the city for the urban areas for treatment. Then this is what I will show to you. You can see this young man. It could be, remember we're discussing dependency of rural areas or settlement on the urban settlement. You can see this young man. He is a farmer that just came from the village and he's sick. He's been taken care of by a nurse in the urban area. Then you see this drug you have here. We're talking about medical service too. You see this drug that you have here? This drug, like I told you, the root and plant or the parts of trees that are gotten from the village are used to make things in the urban area. They could be used to make this drug that you are seeing here. So when somebody also in village is sick, they want to take paracetamol or Panadol or blood capsule, they depend on this also. Then we also need to look at manufactured goods. These products that come from the village, like the cocoa, when it gets to the city, it is converted into something like drink or tea. Even the purple you see of banana, there are some drinks called banana flavored drinks. They are used in the city to produce those drinks, and then they are being sold back to the village. Then we look at another area, market. Urban areas provide market for the food that are being produced in the farms in the rural areas. Also, there are some limitations to these functions of urban settlement. One of them is political discrimination. If in the rural area, a particular village, APC was voted for, and in a particular town, urban area, city, PDP was voted for. If PDP is in power, there could be a discrimination that these people did not vote for us. So what we are supposed to give to them, we may not give to them, and vice versa. Then talk about storage problem due to seasonality of product. That is, where will I keep this? Why we don't know when the other one will be coming. Then we have inadequate communication facilities between the urban and rural areas. If you have a bad road, for example, it is a communication network that's supposed to link the village and the city. If food is produced, it can't get to the village easily. That is a problem. And if you have no television network in the villages, when these foods are produced in the city or urban area, it will be advertised on TV and all other media. But it will not get to the village. Nobody in the village will understand what is going on, that these things have been produced or they have been produced in the urban area. Before we go for the day, I want us to quickly have a recap of what I have been saying. Number one, I said rural settlement is a nucleated or dispersed form of settlement with little or no infrastructure. I also said urban settlement, on the other side, is a nucleated form of settlement with infrastructure like good road, electricity, and so many others. We also talked about what are the things we see in this settlement pattern, or the features of the urban and rural settlement pattern. We talked about the urban settlement having people of different cultural backgrounds, and they engage themselves in diverse activities. But in the rural areas, they mainly focus on primary activities like the lumbering, fishing, farming, and so on. Then we talk about dependency of urban settlement on rural settlement. That is, the area urban settlement depend on rural settlement, like food, the raw materials, then so many others. We also talked about where the rural areas depend on the urban areas. We talked about medical service. We talked about manufactured goods and so many other areas. We've also said some of these dysfunctions may have limitations due to people in rural areas migrating to urban areas, or lack of farmland, and so many others. We've also said the functions of urban settlement, or where rural areas depend on urban areas, may also be limited if there is no good network communication between the rural area and the urban area. And also where they have political discrimination. This does not belong to my party. this belongs to my party. And so Mr. A will not be favored by what we have done in the city, cannot give it to the village because they didn't vote for my party, and so many other problems. For your assignment, please visit your portal. Do it, and we'll mark it, and I'll get back to you. Before we see again, I remain your geography teacher, Mr. Alban Awuleme. Stay blessed and goodbye for now.